A heavy storm swept through Seattle, Washington, flooding the streets and forcing cars to move slowly through sheets of rain. Nurse Olivia Harris, exhausted after a demanding night shift, drove carefully toward home, her windshield wipers working at full speed. As she passed a broken bus shelter, her headlights caught the shape of a man standing alone. He was drenched from head to toe, trembling as the wind whipped around him. His backpack dripped water, his clothes clung to him like heavy weights. Olivia felt a tug of concern, something deep inside telling her she couldn't ignore him, even in her tired state. She slowed her car and rolled down the window, letting the cold rain-filled air rush in. "Sir, you'll get sick out here. Do you need help?" she asked. The man looked at her timidly, as though unsure whether he could trust such unexpected kindness. After a moment, he nodded. His voice was raspy, barely above a whisper when he spoke his name, Mark. His eyes held exhaustion, fear, and something else, perhaps the long-term ache of someone who had gone unnoticed for far too long. Olivia could feel his hesitation, but she also saw his desperation. Without hesitation, she reached behind her seat and grabbed an extra raincoat she kept for emergencies. She handed it to him, watching relief spread across his face as he slipped it on. He climbed into her car quietly, careful not to drip too much water, though the seats were already wet. Olivia drove him to a nearby shelter she knew well, one that welcomed anyone in need with respect. On the way, she stopped by a small cafe and bought him a hot cup of tea. Mark held it with trembling hands, letting the warmth sink into him, still barely speaking. At the shelter, Olivia stayed long enough to make sure Mark had everything he needed. The staff provided him dry clothes, a warm meal, and a bed for the night. Mark's eyes filled with tears as he kept thanking her, over and over, overwhelmed by her kindness. Olivia placed a comforting hand on his shoulder and reminded him that everyone deserved help, warmth, and dignity. As she drove home, her thoughts lingered on him. She hoped he would find a path forward, one that didn't involve shivering alone in the rain. Even after she reached home, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had crossed paths with him for a reason. The next morning came quietly, with the storm finally gone, leaving behind glistening streets and fresh air. Olivia was preparing for work, tying her hair back and sipping hot coffee, when she heard a knock on her door. Surprised, she opened it, and froze. Standing there was Mark, but he looked entirely different. His clothes were clean and dry, his face refreshed, and his posture steady. In his hands he held a small folded note. He smiled softly, though emotion glimmered behind his eyes, and Olivia felt a wave of shock mixed with relief. "I don't have family," he said gently, "but last night, you became the first person to treat me like a human. Thank you for saving me." His voice carried sincerity that touched something deep inside Olivia. She read the note, a simple message of gratitude, written with shaky handwriting that revealed just how much it meant to him. Olivia felt her heart warm, her eyes stinging slightly. She realized that the small act she had offered, a ride, a coat, a cup of tea, had transformed someone's world. In a city full of storms, she had chosen kindness, and that kindness had created a moment that neither of them would ever forget. Hundreds of miles away in New Mexico, the desert stretched endlessly under a blazing sun, the air shimmering with heat. Retired rancher Harold Bennett was repairing a long-neglected fence line on his property, hammering posts into dry earth and checking rusty wire. The wind stirred dust across the open plain, and the cacti cast long shadows across the sand. As he worked, something small and faintly moving caught his eye near a cluster of spiny plants. At first, he thought it might be a desert animal seeking shade, but instinct nudged him closer. His stomach tightened as he approached the figure. Harold's heart nearly stopped when he saw what lay before him. A young Apache boy, no more than 7, was curled tightly in the dust, trembling weakly. His skin was dry and cracked, clothes torn and dusty, and his lips were pale. The child's eyes, barely open, looked up at Harold with fear and exhaustion. Harold's heart ached. He dropped the hammer, knelt, and whispered softly, "Hey, son, I've got you." Carefully, he scooped the boy into his arms, noticing how light and fragile he felt. The child did not resist, he simply shivered against Harold's chest. Back at his ranch house, Harold worked quickly. He set the boy on the couch, wrapped him in blankets, and brought a pot of soup to the stove. The boy ate slowly, staring down at the food as though he had almost forgotten what it was like to be fed. Harold stayed awake the entire night, checking the child's breathing, adjusting blankets, and speaking in soft, comforting tones. The boy didn't speak a word, not even to ask for more food or water, but Harold didn't mind. He had no idea where the child had come from or what circumstances had led him to the desert, yet he cared for him as if he were his own grandson. In the following days, Harold continued to care for the boy. He offered more food, fresh clothes, and small comforts, hoping to restore some sense of security. Slowly, the child began to relax, curling less tightly in the blankets, sometimes glancing around the cozy ranch house with a cautious curiosity. Still, he remained silent, communicating only through hesitant gestures and wide, watchful eyes. Harold didn't press for answers, he knew that patience and care would mean more than questions. Each day, Harold felt a growing bond, a sense of purpose and connection that had been absent in his quiet life since his own children had grown and moved away. 4 days later, as the sun dipped behind the rugged desert hills, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink, there came a knock at Harold's door. He opened it to find 3 Apache women standing there, exhaustion and worry etched into their faces. Their traditional clothing was dusty from travel, and their eyes darted anxiously toward the ranch house. One woman stepped forward and spoke with trembling urgency. "Sir, we are searching for our lost child," she said. Harold's heart raced as he nodded, motioning for them to come inside. The moment the women saw the boy sitting on the couch, relief washed over them. They rushed forward, kneeling and enveloping him in tight, grateful embraces. Tears streamed down their faces as they whispered in their native language, their voices a mixture of joy and sorrow. The boy's eyes softened as he clung to them, finally safe in the arms of those who had been searching. One woman turned to Harold, holding his hand with deep respect. "You saved one of our own," she said. "Our people will never forget this kindness." Harold felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't experienced in years. As the women walked back into the desert with their child, Harold watched them disappear over the hills, the boy's small hand firmly in his mother's. The sun sank lower, casting a golden glow over the sand, and Harold felt a quiet, deep satisfaction. He had acted out of compassion without expectation, yet that compassion had left a lasting impact. In that moment, he understood that kindness extended beyond family or friendship. It became a legacy, remembered and cherished by those whose lives it touched, long after the giver had returned to solitude.